Recognizing that it meant either the success or the failure of the enterprise of the drama as respects the whites, we have been compelled to assign the colored friends to the gallery, which, however, is just as good for seeing and hearing as any other part of the temple. Some were offended at this arrangement. We have received numerous letters from the colored friends, some claiming that it is not right to make a difference, others indignantly and bitterly denouncing us as enemies of the colored people. Some, confident that Brother Russell had never sanctioned such a discrimination, told that they believed it would be duty to stand up for equal rights and always to help the oppressed, etc. We were obliged to explain the facts, assuring all of our loving interest in the colored people and of our desire to do them good and not injury. We again suggested that if a suitable place could be found in which the drama could be presented for the benefit of the colored people alone, we would be glad to make such arrangements or to cooperate with any other in doing so. Our explanations were apparently entirely satisfactory to all of the fully consecrated. To these, we explained that it is a question of putting either the interest of God's cause first or else the interest of the race first. We believed it our duty to put God first and the truth first, at any cost to others or to ourselves. We explained that we taught that all the colored brethren should know our attitude towards them. They should know that we love to serve them in any way possible and to give them the very best we have to give of the gospel message, and that it is only a question of whether our giving to them in one way would entirely deprive us of giving the truth to others.
Hello, everybody.
Howdy.
We thought we would just do a quick video here. Well, quick for us. We know many of you are newly out and starting to watch our channel, or maybe some who never were Jehovah's Witnesses and have friends and family, or all ministers who have congregations that don't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses, and you may not be aware of this. And I know we've covered, Watchtower's racism history in the past with a couple of videos, but we're going to discuss something just a little bit different, and there's segregation practices.
Well, we know that we live in a world today where, there's a lot of dialogue regarding racism. Colin Kaepernick is a really good person that's in everybody's face right now. But the thing is this isn't a problem or an issue that is just relevant to today. It's always been there, and things haven't changed as much as we maybe like to think they have,
or would like them to.
I mean, we can see this whole thing still playing out even in our world today.
And many Jehovah's Witnesses, when we were witnesses, we did not know Watchtower's past with racism and segregation.
Right.
And I want to thank Kenny for bringing this to my attention, because he was surprised to learn about, the segregation that was happening and the racism happening within Watchtower.
See, and we want to remember that as we begin to look at this information in a religious setting, there is not supposed to be any partiality. There is not supposed to be any segregation. And before she gets to this information, let me just remind everybody what, the Apostle Peter said at Acts chapter 10, verses 34 through 36. Now remember, Peter was directly with Christ himself. At this, Peter opened his mouth and said, "For a certainty I perceive that God is not partial, but in every nation the man that fears him and works righteousness is acceptable to him."
So God isn't partial, and everyone of every nation is acceptable to him.
Right, as long as they're working out righteousness. That would mean black, white, red, green, yellow, purple, whatever color you are. As long as you're working righteousness, you're acceptable in God's eyes. But there's a contention with the Apostle Paul and a chosen people. And let's just face it, there are some whites today that think they're chosen by God. The black Jewish Hebrews think that they're chosen by God. So where does this conflict come from? Well, the Apostle Paul, Romans 11, verses 1 and 2. I ask then, God did not reject his people, did he? Wow, the Apostle Peter said God is not partial to anybody as long as they're righteous. But Paul comes in and says, well, God has a chosen people. Never may that happen. For I am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God did not reject his people whom he first recognized. Wow, so you've got two conflicting ideas here. You've got Peter, who was with Christ and said, God doesn't reject anybody. God accepts everybody. He's not partial. And here comes the Apostle Paul showing that there is a partiality. There is a rejecting of everybody that, it's not a Hebrew Jew or whatever.
Well, look at Jehovah's Witnesses today. We've been hearing rumors for over a year now that their message is going to change and is going to be going to the door or talking to someone out in the public and saying, we have the truth, Armageddon's about to start and you're going to be killed unless you're a Jehovah's Witness. Well, we know they've had this attitude that they're God's chosen people from the very beginning. So this is nothing new. And every religion believes this, that they're the chosen God's organization. I mean, you look into the Seventh-day Adventists, the Mormons, Scientology, all of them.
They all say the same thing.
All of them think they're God's chosen people.
And if you're not part of their religious organization, then you're condemned to, well, in Orthodox Christianity, a burning hell.
Yeah. Or destroyed at Armageddon like some other religions believe.
And what a lot of people don't really recognize when reading the Bible is, the Apostle Paul, even though he made a bold-faced statement, God did not reject his people, did he? Well, go read 1 Corinthians 7:25 and 2 Corinthians 8:10. Apostle Paul says, and I give you my opinion. Well, what happens is that opinion now becomes ecclesiastical law. So if Paul was accustomed to giving his opinion and people were following his opinion as ecclesiastical law, then what about the words that says, oh, God did not reject his people, did he? Could that also be an opinion? I'm just saying,
Yeah. Now we want to thank the Screw Generation for the opening clip. And we're going to put the link down below to his original video. I would recommend going and checking out the entire video, because I just took a little clip. So we want to thank him for that. And we want to thank Kenny for this information, because one of those clips that we showed at the beginning was from the 1914 April 1st Watchtower. And yes, the photo drama of creation was segregated in a lot of the cities. And a lot of people were upset about that. And of course you heard Watchtower saying, oh, well, the gallery you can see and hear just as well. But it was still a segregation. And then at the end of the clip, towards the end it says, oh, but if anyone wants to have an all, colored showing of photo drama creation, we would, support that. But everyone would say, oh, well, that was Russell's day. That was back in the 1800s, early 1900s. This was 1914. Different world back then. But I want to bring it up to a little bit more modern time.
Yeah, well, let me ask this question. Okay. How long did it take the Watchtower Babel Crap Society to get a black man on the governing body?
Well, as far as I know, what's his name? Hurd was the first one.
Exactly, but how long did that take?
A long time.
See? Exactly.
Now, many do not know this, but how long did it take Watchtower to quit segregating kingdom halls to whites and blacks? Or I should say colors, because they also considered Hispanic and several other colors, So how long did it take that? And, many would say, oh, well, I don't remember of any, segregation going on within kingdom halls. Well, I have asked several older ones, and it took until the 50s, especially down south here in the United States, before kingdom halls were not segregated. They would have separate meetings, between the whites and colors. And I know some of the apologists and some of Jehovah's Witnesses are, the usual thing. Oh, you guys are lying apostates.
Well, you know what that's
son
called?
of Satan.
You know what that is? You know what that's called? Severe selective research syndrome.
That's exactly what it is.
Because you're selecting what you want to research, and you only want to research what makes you feel warm and comfortable. So that's called severe selective research syndrome. And it really applies across the board to anything that anybody states.
Yeah. Now, when Kenny contacted me, he said he had seen this in a 1940 report, a convention report. Now, I don't have the 1940 convention report, but I do have the 1941 convention report, and I printed up this page. Okay, like I said, this is the 1941 convention report of the Jehovah's Witness Assembly, and this is on page 59. Over in the second column, I'd say, what would you call that, Mike? A little more than halfway down?
A little below half.
Yeah, and they're talking about the Children's Day that they had at the convention and how many were baptized. Due to conditions over which the society has no control there in St. Louis, the many colored brethren amongst the candidates were obliged to be immersed in a fine pool in a colored institution downtown, into which they were speedily taken and thereafter transported back to the arena by a motorcade, all in readiness and at their service, free and voluntary. So they actually get a little defensive. Beyond Watchtower's control, there was a segregated baptism.
Beyond their control. Now let's just bring this up to a little more modern day application. Reporting child abuse in some states is mandatory, but yet it's within your control that you do not report it. So don't give me this crap due to beyond your control, because when the law states that you have to report child abuse, you don't do it. So it is within your control, Watchtower.
Don't they keep saying obey God as ruler rather than men?
Yeah.
So if this was a law in St. Louis to do segregation, like Mike is bringing out, why pay attention to that law?
Right.
And not the mandatory reporting today on child abuse within your organization. You can't have your cake and eat it too and pick and choose here.
No. See, Paul set the example. I give you my opinion. See, this is just all Watchtower's opinion now, because when the issue is forced, they go to an opinion rather than obeying God as ruler.
So I've got something else here that shows that, do you think Watchtower would be humble and admit their past history with the segregation? And yeah, I can tell that look on your face. Okay, so I have a bond volume here. 1952 Watchtower. February 1st. Page 94. Questions from readers.
Now, but I want to make one thing clear here before you do this. Now, you're not suffering from severe selective research syndrome, are you?
Oh, no, I'll research anything.
Cool.
Are you?
Not at all. I research anything and everything.
Yeah, I will research anything anybody sends me. I may not agree with all of it, but I will look it up and I will research it. And anybody who sends emails, I will look it up, and research it. Hey, I'm open. I have an open mind. I'm always changing. So, okay, so back to the Watchtower here, page 94, questions from readers. If the Watchtower Society is free from racial prejudice, why does it tolerate segregation at its assemblies in certain sections of country? Is this not a course of compromise? This was 1952, and they're asking why, some certain sections or why some assemblies there's segregation going on. Look it up in your own Watchtower. The Watchtower CD-ROM goes back to 1950 Watchtower, so look it up. Questions from readers. Here's their answer. Why do we tolerate the segregation laws and policies of certain governments and organizations of this world? And like Mike brought out, why follow those laws and obey the secular authorities instead of God on this and not the child abuse reporting laws?
So they brag about winning United States Supreme Court decisions about their right to go preaching on Sundays, but yet why didn't they take this to the United States Supreme Court?
That's a good question.
Why didn't you fight this in court, Watchtower? Why? Idiots.
Back to this. Because Jehovah has not commissioned us to convert
my
the
God.
world. So there's your answer.
Oh my, well, no, but God, Jehovah has not commissioned them to convert the world.
Which
Then why go from door to door? Why go from door to door preaching?
okay,
Because isn't that a commission?
to convert the world.
To convert the world? I mean, go and preach therefore this good news of the kingdom, baptizing them out. Oh my God!
You know what, Mikey? This should have been an April Fool's article.
I think it was.
No, it's February 1st.
Oh, close enough. Jesus. Well, it's not your commission to convert the world, but yet it is your commission to preach the good news and warn the wicked before they're being destroyed. Talk about a dichotomy.
You know, I was on the phone yesterday morning for someone who is a current witness. It was great talking to you. Hi, sweetie. And he said that he gets so much information, because he is fully awake. Mm-hmm. And he gets so much information from our videos. So those of you who are still technically in and wanting to talk to your family, you know, maybe this is something to pull out and show them. So I'm going to read that sentence again. Because Jehovah has not commissioned us to convert the world, which is wicked beyond recovery and hence will be destroyed, Jehovah has commissioned us to preach the gospel. See, that's what he's commissioned them to do.
Yeah, but do you see the problem, the issues that it creates? They'll only go so far with what makes them feel warm and comfortable and fuzzy. Like, well, we better fight for our right to preach on Sundays.
To preach the gospel.
But let's not fight for, the black man's right to be baptized with a white man. Jeez.
Now, what should we do? Drop preaching to fight racial issues?
Do you see the sarcasm in that comment?
Well, I was going to say, I sense the sarcasm.
Yep,
and,
exactly.
The defensive.
Yep, exactly. Sounds like some other people we've recently been talking to.
Yeah. We never have separate meetings in baptism when we can have them together. So when they can have them together, they will, but when impossible, shall we have separate meetings in baptism or none at all? There again, getting defensive.
There's the sarcasm.
So when they can have them together, they will, but when they can't and it's impossible, should we have none at all?
Yeah, but now let's just look at this from the time period. This is 1952.
52.
So they're renting huge stadiums that by law are already segregating. So here's the problem, that when Watchtower had a large convention back then, there wasn't anything available to where they could baptize black and whites together, because they were renting stadiums and assembly halls that already fell under the judicial laws or the segregation laws at that time in history.
Well, it appears they had to bus, other
exactly.
colored,
Exactly.
Yeah. Away from where the, other baptisms were.
So now, at this time in history, was Watchtower building assembly halls, for their own sake? No, that didn't come till later.
Yeah. Okay, so back to this. Shall we serve spiritual food to all, even if separately, or serve it to none? Shall we provide baptism for all, even if separately, or provide it for none? Should we buck Caesar's segregation laws when they do not force us to violate God's laws? What about that God is not partial?
That's right.
That sounds like it's bucking God's law to me.
But yet they bucked the system when it came to not preaching on Sundays. They took that all the way to the Supreme Court, and you guys brag about it.
Well, now they're going to defend it. God does not forbid separate assembly and baptism. So because God doesn't forbid it, it's okay. And he commands assembly and assembly. Matthew 28:19 and Hebrews 10:25. So should we disobey God to fight a racial issue? To buck the segregation laws would bring on disruption of the witness work, halting of it, mob violence, and possible loss of life. But they didn't have any problem, fighting this over the preaching.
No, they didn't. They didn't know because it benefited them. Because, now that's one extra day when the Watchtower peddlers can be peddling the magazine.
Only laws prohibiting gospel preaching will we buck at that price.
There it is, in black and white.
Some may argue segregation is prohibited by God, citing Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free man. There is neither male nor female. For you are all one in union with Christ Jesus. That Paul spoke in a spiritual sense and not in a literal physical sense is obvious.
That only applies spiritually. Oh, I get it now. No, really, I got it.
Since actually there were male and female, slave and free, Jew and Greek, because of the existence of Jew and Greek, he specifically accommodated himself in his preaching to such classes. His recognition of slave and free men we will consider in more detail, since it bears directly on segregation. How so? Because segregation is rooted in slavery, is the outgrowth and hangover of slavery, segregation, the stain left by slavery, is a lesser evil than slavery. So if the Bible does not instruct Christians to fight slavery, it would not sanction them to battle the lesser evil of segregation at the expense of gospel preaching. Wow! Even within the Christian congregation, Paul did not protest the slavery of his time. And we know the Bible is full of slavery.
It's pro-slavery.
Yeah. And it goes in to discuss, slavery. And, it's quite lengthy. So,
Yeah,
I would recommend...
Yeah, they actually do, a good page and a half in defending the reasons why they're, segregating.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm going over to page 95 in the first column. Jehovah is no respecter of persons, neither are his people, but the world in which we live is. Whites are prejudiced against colored. Colored are prejudiced against whites. In some colored communities, after nightfall, a white person would enter at the risk of his very life. To justify this on the grounds that the whites started the discrimination is not scriptural. Now, where the danger is extreme, should white persons enter these hostile communities and suffer beating and possibly death to prove they have a democratic right to be there? Should a white witness endanger his life to attend a meeting of colored witnesses in such places or stay overnight with his colored brothers there just to prove his democratic right to do so? So then it goes on to talk about discrimination, not only between colored people, but, other races like the Indians in India and all of this. And then at the top of page 95, second column, it says, who is innocent to throw the first stone? Can we not see that all classes of the human race are evil? That if we start reforming, we shall be lost in an impossible task with endless discriminations and many varieties or injustices to beat down, which crusading social and political organizations of this world have hopelessly fought for years. For us to become like them would be to fail with them, consume our time in such reforms, lose out as Jehovah's Witnesses, and please only the devil. So let us please God by preaching the gospel. Well, I've got a few questions and issues with this. If you're so focused that you say you can't fight any of this so that, you focus on preaching, then why do you spend so much time going to these NGO meetings, affiliated with the United Nations, on like the blood issue and you know, other religious issues, you say, oh, well, this affects us and we need to know what's going on. Well, that's not what you said back in 1952.
Well, here's something else that I caught when you was reading that. Go back up to here when it says, can we not see that all classes of human races are evil? That if we start reforming, we shall be lost in an impossible task? Remember that idiot J.W. Broadcast when he said, we will never change the two-witness rule. But yet, you did reform with your segregation, didn't you? Why won't you reform with the two-witness rule and give people back their freedom?
Yeah. You know, they reformed so much in the past. Why can't you reform your child abuse policies?
That's right. But see, they took a hard line here. Why? Because they could get away with it back then. Because the governments weren't breathing down their necks on the segregation thing. But once the government started breathing down everybody's necks regarding the segregation, Watchtower did have to reform.
So about halfway down on page 95, it says, let us boast in Jehovah in our equality in his sight, rather than wanting to boast in equality in the world's sight. 1 Corinthians 1:26 and 31.
But yet you boast that you won so many Supreme Court battles, but yet you refuse to take this one all the way to the... This would have gone a whole lot further in qualifying you as God's people if you'd have done this. But you didn't dare touch this one, did you, Watchtower? Because did you not think that Jehovah was going to give you the victory? Or was there more at play?
I love the ending of this part. All of us await this vindication from God, which will come in his due time. Until then, as Paul advised concerning slavery, we advise concerning its lingering trace, segregation. Do not let it worry you. 1 Corinthians 7:21. When possible, we will meet together. When not possible, we will meet separately. But in either event, we are always united in spirit, brothers equal in our own sight, in Christ's sight, and in God's sight. Don't sound very equal to me.
Why would anybody even get involved with a religion that segregated way back then?
Yeah.
And brags about how many Supreme Court wins they have won in their favor, but yet this one they conveniently ignore.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, how they say, oh, well, you know, we're too involved in preaching work. We're not going to waste our time fighting this in the world scene.
Yeah, but they fought for the laws to change that favored them.
Yeah, well, I mean, Rutherford even fought to be able to preach on Sundays.
Yeah.
Because there was several areas here in the United States where they could not preach on Sunday. And Rutherford took that to the Supreme Court to get that law changed.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's just pick and choose, pick and choose. Yeah. And I know every organization can pick their own battles. But, you know, for those of you who did not know that Watchtower did practice segregation up until the 50s, and like I said, this article is from 1952, and they were still defending it. So, thank you, everybody, for watching, and thank you, Kenny, for sending, you know, this information. That was an eye-opener for me, because I did not know they practiced segregation.
Mm-hmm.
So you all have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.
Bye.